Hello YouTube! Today, I have for you, I don't know why I'm showing you the front and back, charging port replacement. I will preface this by saying most charging ports are typically just dirty, so you should probably, at least what I do, is there's a couple of things that I look out for. First is if it goes in all the way. An easy way is, let's just say, I know that doesn't look like much, but if you can see approximately that much of your charging port, you probably just have a dirty port. And another thing is the pins, although the lightning plug, lightning port, whatever, has pins on both sides, that's just because it's reversible. In all reality, in the actual charging port itself, the pins are only on, I don't even know if I would be able to get this because it's just dark in there, but they're only on the bottom. So whenever you're charging the device, if it's dirty, a lot of the times you will have to sort of lift up or, point downward. So, which is to get, as much contact as you can. So start out by cleaning the charging port. Usually what I suggest is if this is your charging port, the hardest bits, you have to get past the flat part is easy. You have to get past the corners. And, once again, if this is your charging port, if the bottom is right here, I usually don't suggest using tweezers, but you have my permission. Just don't tell anyone. And stick towards essentially the top of the charging port as much as you can. The awesome thing about, maybe not awesome, but if you end up damaging the port, great thing about ports is they're inexpensive and, well, I'll just say they're inexpensive. It's definitely doable. It is a board out ever since the iPhone 7, I would say pretty much, but I will go, I'm not turning back. I'm going to say it, every iPhone, at least as of this filming, is a board out repair, which is kind of annoying because there's just more stuff you can do that you have to take out. At least on the previous models, you didn't have to. Like, I could literally do it with the screen still attached, and it would only take a few minutes. I did a 5C the other day, and I was blown away at how easy it was because I haven't done one of those in forever. And I'm so used to it just being so complicated. And I don't mean so complicated, but it's significantly more, it was significantly easier. Whatever, I'm rambling. So I'll get back to this. Some of the parts that we're gonna need are, not parts, some of the, well, I guess obviously parts we're gonna need. I get mine from Mobile Centrics. The difference between aftermarket and premium is only a few dollars. I would highly suggest just spending that few dollars. From my understanding, noise canceling doesn't work on the aftermarket, but it does. So essentially better noise, better microphone quality for, I don't know, $3 or $4. Might not even be $3. Just spend the money. Like I said, this is a board out, so there are going to be a lot of screws. That's what we need a magnetic mat for. If you don't have a magnetic mat, or if you're on a budget or whatever you want to call it, packing tape. Just flip it upside down. You can place your screws, and then, if you need to, let's just say you're not doing this all in one stretch, you can take the tape, I don't know if you're doing it on the dinner table and then dinner comes around, you can, essentially put it up, or take it, put it on a plate, move it aside, and your screws don't get mixed up. After that, we're going to need, in no particular order, an opening tool, a pentalobe, a Phillips, 2 different bits, a Y000. As you can see, I get mine, actually I probably can't see, but I get mine from iFixit. I mentioned this in pretty much in every video, but I used to strip screws. When the 7 came out, I got these, whatever. I didn't think it was cheap, but whatever. I got a tri-point, and God, it was awful. And then somebody said, get iFixit. I have. Never going back. Then they have another one, specific to iPhone, I believe. It's a standoff bit. And then black stick, nylon spudger. and some sort of heat source. It's not necessary, but definitely helps. And with that, let's get started. So this is a phone I bought, and I had every intention of selling it, but by the time I went to it, yeah, I don't know, whatever, became blacklisted. So now I'm using it as a prop. So just like any repair, we start out with removing our pentalobe. Next, our opening tool. Now, at least on this model, I may or may not have opened it before, I forget. But you really don't want to, as you can see, the adhesive, the perimeter adhesive is essentially gone as far as adhesive strength is concerned. And I'm going to put my thumb up to it. That is how far your opening tool can go. Essentially there's this, you can see this area right here. It literally just runs right along there. And be careful, especially if you're reusing your screen. The LCD flex is right here. So apparently I have opened up this phone, because there's no retaining brackets. I remember using those for something. So there are some Phillips retaining brackets, or not, there's a retaining bracket and then 4 Phillips, but obviously you'll know that because your phone is directly in front of you, and then a smaller bracket and 2 tri-wings. So remove those. Now, before disconnecting anything, as you can see, I accidentally disconnected because I didn't have a retaining bracket. You always want to make sure that your battery is the first and last thing to be disconnected. There's sort of a safe spot. Essentially right next to it, there are components, tiny little capacitors and filters, immediately in front, but to the side of each of these, and then same thing here. You can sort of just wedge immediately under. I use metal, but this is one of those from time to time. But this is one of those do as I say, not as I do. I'll just say this: it's way easier to damage your device with metal than it is with one of these. So use one of these if you're not proficient. Next, we need to remove all of the screws holding in the board. Yeah, so apparently I've already started parting out this phone. Take our flat spudger, wedge it just under, I'm talking a fraction of a millimeter. And this next part, you can just use your tweezers. I don't really care about this camera, but if you are doing this entire thing in less than an hour, It's probably not that necessary, but if this is something you're going to do overnight or over the course of, I don't know, a day or something, especially if you have, I don't know, this is going to sound weird, but like free-flowing air. Like if you have, let's just say these, if you leave them face up, have a tendency to get dusty. It's not a bad idea to put your camera inside of this. That way you don't accidentally get dust all over your camera. As well, there's no easy way to clean it. You'd essentially have to replace it. These things are, I don't know, somewhere around 40 bucks. 40 bucks that you shouldn't spend. So next we're going to remove the rest. There's a couple of screws for the board, 1, 2, 3, 4. But first we're going to remove the SIM tray. There's a little pin right here, right there. Just push it back in. You can use your fingernail for some of this stuff. Usually I do, but once again, if you're just for the sake of video, you know, if I use my fingernail, my hand is covering the entire thing. You don't know what you're looking at. Obviously, the point of these is to be as instructional as possible. So gently lift up. Now there is a bit of adhesive on the underside of this, so I don't usually use heat. I just sort of gently nudge it back and forth, and essentially the adhesive, you can see it right here, is roughly the size of this black square, rectangle, I guess. Last thing holding in the board are these flex cables. Once again, for the sake of film, you'll see, I'll show you in just a sec, but you'll see that there's essentially a little bit of an overhang. I guess I can just show you on this right here, just for context, but you can see there's a little bit of room right in front of the connector. I mean, pretty much you just lift up, and then once it's lifted up, you can just fold back. Same principle with your camera. It's not a bad idea to put that in a static free bag, ideally, but next we have to contend with a charging port. So at this point, I mean, there's essentially one of a couple of ways to get the charging port out. One is to literally just rip it up. If your plan is to replace it, And there's really no sense in, I mean, as a general rule, I try to not just tear stuff out. But once again, if you're replacing it, who cares if you damage it in the process? The second is, like, if you're, let's just say, watching this video as part of a housing replacement, obviously this is something that you want to be gentle with, which is where the heat comes in. It does make it quite a bit easier. So even if you are not reusing this port, this is something you haven't done very often. You know, you don't know how much force to apply. But your microphones, let me zoom in, they're held on with adhesive. But you can, as you can see, just peel that back, and then there's a little bit more adhesive right here, but you can just sort of, and then you can see that there is some still here, or actually not see, I can see, would be a better way to say it. Sort of just use the wedge, just push forward. Then last but not least, let me see. Literally just pull up and away. And this is our charging port. Let's put in our new one. So before we jump into reinstall, I will point out, so you may have stumbled across this video, not because, so this occurred to me just while I was saying this right now, but there are obviously other components that are attached to this charging port assembly, mainly your microphones, and, well, obviously there's other things like your speaker and your Taptic engine, but sometimes, typically the speaker isn't the issue. Typically it's your microphones that you're replacing. Either, I've seen it before where it, you literally just drop the phone so many times, this piece here will just bow outward, and I've literally seen it where these just tear, and then all of a sudden your lower microphone doesn't work, which is when you're putting the phone up to your ear, or for voice memos. Which is why if you're ever having microphone problems, just switch between either regular phone or like what is it? You can test it out by testing voice memos, tests out the lower microphones, front-facing video, or Siri or speakerphone tests the upper microphone, which is right here. So, fun fact. But it's not an uncommon thing where someone will call me out and say, hey, my microphones work, they're just really muffled. Well, that can be because of, let's see if we can get this. So this one actually is kind of, so you should, no, I lied. But a telltale sign is when you do exactly this. You should be able to see through, so in this case, these 4 holes are our speaker. If you can barely see through these, inevitably the, what, 2 or 3 next to them? 2, 3, whatever. Hold on. Well, 3 next to them are going to be just as dirty, and that's why you're probably having microphone issues, in which case there's a way that you can literally just warm up this. You can pop off this piece right here, take the mesh out, and literally just clean it out. And that's all that it takes sometimes. So, which is another reason that you might want to be gentle on your charging port, especially if you are reusing it. But for everyone else that isn't, reinstall. So I don't actually need to do, like I said, I don't actually need to do a charging port, but just to show what the rest of you are going through, this has, the obviously OEM has, I mean, they fit and fold in just perfectly, but I will show you What to avoid. Number one, mainly don't just immediately jump into reinstalling everything, as sometimes the 7 and 7 Plus have these 2 alignment pins, which make it very easy, or so much easier, to properly align the charging port, because you have, I mean, essentially no tolerance when connecting the what is it, when you drop the board in. So if you're vertical, you know, north or south too much by, I mean, it's such a tiny amount, then you literally need to take the board out, reposition the port, and then try again. So usually what I do, when I say usually, I would say usually, I always do this, is I will drop in the port, and then literally the next thing that I drop in is the board. That way I can get an idea of, you know, how on point I am. So let's start with this. You want to be very gentle removing the you want to make sure that you're actually removing. Most charging ports, mine did, have these films over them. If you don't, then your microphones aren't going to work, and you're going to have to take the phone apart again. After that, you want to sort of tuck these back if you can, as it's just going to be easier for you to install. Next, I make sure that it's aligned properly. It shouldn't be too loose. It shouldn't be too tight. I mean, I don't know if you can hear this, but there's a, you know, audible click, which is good. And my OCD doesn't like this. So there's that. And you want to, just don't like things hanging out. Next, we can nudge our, there is an alignment pin. These are supposed to align. Let me see if I can try to get this on camera. But there's a little metal piece right here. And there's a little slot. In this case, it's a hole. So from this angle, there's a little pin right here. And of course, this doesn't want to stick. I'll hold it there. But there's a little pin right there. And if you, like me, just, you know, whatever your adhesive, you lost your adhesive, they're still on this part. It's not the end of the world. This little plastic bracket right here is what will ultimately hold it in place. The adhesive is just overkill, or not overkill, but redundant. Now, the next one is held in with the speaker, but we don't want to install the speaker yet. So, like I said, 7s used to have this really handy bracket, or these alignment pins. Now we don't have those anymore. but the closest thing that we have are these two. Let me back up. But the closest thing that we have are these posts. And if this flex doesn't sit exactly right, don't worry about it. But we drop our board. And it might not feel right, but as long as these three flexes, I guess 5 technically, but these 3 and then these 2, aren't tucked under the board, you're good. So once we're here, before putting in any of the screws, I will reconnect. This tiny one is the wireless charger. Now, you can kind of get a gauge of by just aligning, and you can literally you can visually see the end of male to female. The wider flexes, you want to press left to right or right to left. Avoid pressing just dead center, or else they have a tendency to just not work as well or connect as well. So that's a success. So now we can secure the board. So it's difficult for me to get this on video, but essentially you just want to sort of nudge the flex in, and it usually lines up just right. You just gotta just push down. So make sure to do that. I forgot that the first time around. So you want to make sure that your Taptic engine is pretty tightly secured. I mean, keep in mind its only job is just vibrating. So I've seen many times on devices that have never been opened or repaired that someone will say every time I click my home button, or you plug in your phone and it gives you that vibrate, they say, oh, it sounds terrible rattling. Well, that's inevitably going to be your Taptic engine. So besides sounding like crap. Well, I guess that's just about it. Sounds like crap. So make sure to tighten it so you don't have to open up your phone again. Now, make sure your camera lens doesn't have any dust or debris. I usually like to connect the flexes and then drop the camera in. You don't have to be, I mean, you can use, a teensy bit of force dropping it into its housing. You don't have to be too easy on it. Just say the part of the camera that's fragile is not the metal housing. Now, like I mentioned before, I don't have any retaining brackets, but just remember you have 2 tri-wing and 4 Phillips. The longer Phillips goes bottom right. These 3 are just the shorter ones. But I mentioned this at the beginning. I will mention it again. First and last thing that you connect is always the battery, so make sure your battery is disconnected. Now, this one, I like to, honestly, with most flexes I just like to, out of habit, I don't just press dead center. I prefer to, because they have a tendency to bow, so I press on the left, then on the right. Now, that doesn't hold true for the home button flex, as it's just so short, but it certainly does for the LCD touch. So, get it in place, left, right. And if you folded your battery connector back, they have a tendency to, you sort of have to fold it back. There we go. Obviously, this phone's been sitting in a drawer, so it's probably dead. But we're going to consider that a successful repair. So first of all, if you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. Pretty much, if you want to test all the different functions of the device, just to make sure that they work, I mean, obviously we can do one right here by just plugging it in, and it should. There we go. So you can faintly see there we go. So you can see it's charging. That's pretty self-explanatory. Next is your lower microphones. Like I said, you can access them through the voice memos app. After that, you have the Taptic engine. After that, you have the loudspeaker. I mean, loudspeaker is pretty simple. You just go into your settings, or I mean, honestly, literally anything. Play literally anything back. Usually, what I do is I go to sounds and haptics, and I just play a sound. So that works. And then for the Taptic engine, you just flick this switch. Some people turn that off, but obviously, you typically get the same function by either plugging in and it vibrates, or you press the home button. And I mean, some people aren't aware of this, but the home button doesn't actually click or do anything. The Taptic engine moves, which sort of tricks your brain into thinking that it's clicking when it really doesn't do anything. It's technically not even a button, it's a sensor. But I'm just rambling on at this point. I don't know, if you have any tips or tricks that I left out, please feel free to leave a comment below. Also, comment down below whatever your favorite, or if you learned anything new. And I'll finish this off by mentioning, so this is the perils of not having a retaining bracket. Don't lose your retaining brackets. But we're going to pretend like I just put them in. Now, whenever you're taking apart a phone, you want to make sure before you reinstall everything, especially when you're dealing with a lot of screws like we just did, that you don't have any screws because they have a tendency to get stuck on basically anything magnetic. As you can see, still there. So, still there. So make sure you don't have any screws that get stuck on your speaker or Taptic engine, or the third place would be along the perimeter adhesive, which I have done on this one at least. Once you can confirm that, make sure that the LCD and home button are tucked inside the phone. The last thing that you want is to pinch those two together. And then obviously, last but not least, your penna lobes. Please make sure to give the video a like if you got something out of it. It really helps out with the all-knowing YouTube algorithm. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.